Let's now have a look at Foucault's account of the history of madness itself in his book Madness and Civilization. He talks about madness not as some unchanging idea, but he looks first of all at a series of behaviours in each particular historical moment and tries to reconstruct what those behaviours tell us. Let him put it in his own words in this quotation. If we suppose, he says, that it, madness, does not exist, then what can history make of these different events and practices which are apparently organised around something that's supposed to be madness? So in other words, he's saying, let's forget what we know about madness. Let's just look at what people did at particular points in history and try and work out what they believed and what they assumed, the rules they were following, by looking at those behaviours. The first period he looks at in any detail is the Renaissance. And he focuses particularly, he begins Madness and Civilization by focusing on the arresting image of the ship of fools. This is the representation of the ship of fools by Hieronymus Bosch. The idea is that ships of madmen sail the waterways of Europe in the Renaissance. He calls them madmen in search of their reason, docking at different cities. And it becomes a mythical image of the mad cast on a sea of uncertainty. What madness is doing at this particular point in history, says Foucault, among other things, is that it's teaching us of the coming overturning of the established order in the final judgment. So it's almost a memento mori, lest we become too proud. The madness shows us that things will be turned on their heads on the final day. And also the mad in this particular time in history are sources of a particular wisdom. Think of Shakespeare's fools, for example. Think of Hamlet as he goes mad and the wisdom that he has. There's a peculiar wisdom in madness, as well as it pointing to the beyond, pointing to the apocalypse at this particular period in history. Now, in the classical period, all of that disappears. He calls this period the Great Confinement because he argues it's when the mad were systematically locked up rather than being put on ships, for example. In this period, the category to conjure with is not really madness itself, but unreason. And unreason covers a group of people much broader than simply the mad. It covers criminals, libertines, and vagabonds. And what they have in common is that these people are unproductive in society. They don't produce wealth, they don't earn a living, and they're all locked up for that reason. In this period, the human being is understood as a rational animal. It's rationality that defines us. The mad have lost their rationality, therefore they've reduced themselves to the level of the inhuman, to animals. And therefore it is only appropriate in this classical period to treat the mad as animals, because they've lost their rational humanity. There's also a sense in which it's their own fault that they've lost it. It's slightly unclear to what extent it's their responsibility and to what extent they were unable to help it. But there is a sense of personal responsibility for being mad in this period in history. And thirdly, therefore Foucault can say the animal in man no longer has any value as a sign of the beyond, as it did in the Renaissance period, pointing to the apocalypse. It has become his madness, without relation to anything but itself. His madness in the state of nature. So madness is simply a reduction to the animal in this period. It's got no wisdom, it's got no apocalyptic symbolism. Now we come to the modern age, which he calls the age of the asylum, and we meet our friend Philippe Pinel again. You remember the one who released the mad from their chains in the Bicêtre hospital. He also talks about Samuel Tuck, the English Quaker who set up a home for the care of the mad as well. Now, whereas the classical hospital was a place of confinement and punishment, the modern asylum, Foucault argues, is a place of treatment and cure. Again, we would think what a wonderful thing that is, what progress that is. And Foucault just tries to stop us in our tracks at this point and says, this gesture is regarded as an act of liberation, but the truth was quite different. Something more subtle is going on than simply freeing the man. And I want to draw your attention to a particular passage where he describes a tea party in Samuel Tuck's asylum, because I think it really helps us to see what he means when he says it's not as simple as simply the mad being liberated from their chains. Let me read you his account that he quotes in Madness and Civilization of this tea party. The directors and staff of the retreat thus regularly invited several patients to tea parties. These are the insane patients. The guests dress in their best clothes and vie with each other in politeness and propriety. The best fare is provided, and the visitors are treated with all the attention of strangers. The evening generally passes with the greatest harmony and enjoyment. It rarely happens that any unpleasant circumstance occurs. The patients control to a wonderful degree their different propensities, and the scene is at once curious and effectively gratifying. Close quote. So you can imagine in the insane asylum, there's a very civilized middle-class tea party, and all the mad are treated with respect, behave very politely. Now, what's going on there? This is Foucault's analysis of that tea party. He says, incessantly cast in this empty role of unknown visitor, unknown as in it's not clear that they're insane, their identity as insane is being covered up, and challenged in everything that can be known about him, drawn to the surface of himself by a social personality silently imposed by observation, by form and mask. The madman is obliged to objectify himself in the eyes of reason as the perfect stranger, that is, as the man whose strangeness does not reveal itself. The city of reason welcomes him only with this qualification and at the price of this surrender to anonymity. Now, Foucault puts this in a very striking way. He says that the body is no longer chained, but the soul is now chained. The mad person is no longer allowed to be who he or she is. They have to play this role if they want to enter the community of reason. They're completely chained down in their behavior. So it's not simply a freeing, it's a relocation of the chains from the body to the mind and the soul.